I'd say most handlers get bit because they're overconfident. You see some genuine mistakes, absolutely. And if you do this job, it's not if, it's when. Statistically, you're gonna end up getting hurt at some point. So when somebody does get bit, I don't like to point the finger and be like, look what you did wrong. But a lot of times it is people who overestimate themselves, overestimate their ability, and have a mistake like that, you know? And it's part of the learning process too, unfortunately, for a lot of younger guys, you know. But yeah, you'll see a lot of younger guys make mistakes because they overestimate themselves, and it is kind of the learning process, you know. And I did it too, you know. I've got a nice little scar right there when I was like 18, and I'm like, I bet I can do this. No, you can't. And I found that out, you know. And so that does happen. But you see a lot of guys that, you know, they overestimate themselves or they underestimate the animal. And then some cases you see people, they're just not respecting the animal, that kind of a thing too. But then even so, there's also straightforward accidents. An accident is going to happen to everybody, no matter what your skill level is. You can be the best in the world. What if you trip? You know, what if something happens outside of your control? And that happens. So that's why I tell people, like, you got to understand it's not if, it's when. And if you do get bit, try, obviously, minimize the damage, but you don't brag about it. It's not a badge of honor. It's a sign that, hey, you messed up. You know, like, I don't brag about getting bit, and I know a lot of people that do, and I'm like, come on, you know, don't brag about that. That's for one, our job is to make these animals more likable to the public, and we want to help protect these animals, you know, like this, hanging out with him and making people like the alligator. The more I talk about injuries and things like that, the more it makes people fear the animal, and that's not what I want at the end of the day. So I want to talk about how interesting they are and how awesome they are. And you can show their defensive behavior, because let's be honest, that's what people want to see. But when people come down, oh, well, have you ever been bit? And I'm like, no, nothing bad. And especially when people are looking for that answer, I'm like, nope, never. You know, I've had a couple nicks. I've never had a severe bite, thankfully. But, you know, I just try to move away from that whole kind of topic of conversation, because I'd much rather talk about how interesting the animal is than about injuries. I mean, when I was a kid, I was an absolute dinosaur nut. You know, I knew like every kind of dinosaur. And although these guys are not really closely related to dinosaurs, it's like a living dinosaur to me, you know. When you actually look at the evolutionary spectrum, it's like, yeah, they're not really a dinosaur, but they are like a living dinosaur in my mind. Just because they're so cool and they're so awesome. And they are so much more personable than people think. You know, people think they're just some mindless killing machine, and when you actually hang out with them, you get to know them. Like, look at him, we're sitting in the water. He can leave anytime he wants, and he's just sitting here hanging out with me. The training work that I do with them, teaching them to associate things like their name with getting fed, calling them over. I mean, it's really rewarding and really interesting. So the first time I ever started working with an alligator, I was like 15 or 16 at a local nature center, and I started volunteering with them, and then I ended up becoming a camp counselor at this nature center, and so I take care of their young alligator that they had there. And then when I moved to South Florida for college, I started working at a park doing their venomous snake shows, and then we started an alligator show out of that too. One of the moments that really sticks out in my mind was during that deep water alligator wrestling competition that we did, and I was holding onto this gator. It was like 9'8", 250 pounds, and deep water, and I'm holding on to him, like I have him like from the back, and so his jaws are right here, and I'm holding onto him like this, and we're just death rolling underwater. And every time his jaws would come up to try to bite, you know, you bend this way and the jaws literally come down like that and close, and then down like that and close, and you're moving with him like that. And that was exciting, to say the least. And, you know, obviously it makes you really nervous, because at any moment you mess up, he can literally rip your head right off your body. But what really freaked me out is then he kept on rolling me underwater, and I was drowning. And I have a really good breath hold. I'm a free diver. I can free dive over 80 feet on one breath. but you got limits. And so we're under the water and he's rolling and he's rolling. And I had this like almost like out of body moment of clarity where I'm like, I'm gonna drown because he won't stop. And if I let go, he's gonna bite me and he's gonna rip my head off. So I have to hold on, but if I hold on, I'm gonna drown. And I started sucking water, you know, and that was one of those moments like I got really freaked out because I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it out of this. And eventually I got back up to the surface and I just popped my head up for one moment. As soon as I did, boom, jaws came down and everybody thought I was dead. I mean, I wasn't, I'm here. But that was exciting. I don't like to do anything that takes more chance than skill. And when you're, an example of that is like doing head tricks, you know? I don't do a lot of head tricks. I'll do them if there's a reason. Like if I'm doing a show and, you know, people in the audience, put your head in his mouth. I'll be like, $100 right now. No, really, I do. And if nobody throws up $100, I'm not gonna do it. It's, why would I? It's not worth it. But I have had people pull up $100 and I'm like, all right, I can do it. And that is still more skill than chance, without a doubt. You know, and I can do a head trick and I can do it pretty safely and I feel very comfortable and confident doing it. But there's still an element of chance in there that's a lot more than other interactions with an alligator. So I try to stay away from that kind of stuff, you know? Or like a one-handed head trick where you open it up and you let go of the jaw and it's just hanging there, because at any moment, if he wants to, they start to close. And if he does, how do you know it's coming? You don't know. And so that's why, like, I've only done that one a couple of times when there's a lot of money on the line for like a wrestling competition, you know, where like there's a lot of money behind it. But otherwise, if you do that one and let's say these are the jaws, they can just start to close and you won't see it coming and you won't feel it coming because you're not holding on. And as soon as he contacts, it's gonna slam. So that's running that line of more chance than skill, and I try to avoid that situation. Fear is never a good thing. Fear makes you act irrationally. So like when I'm working with an alligator, I get nervous, don't get me wrong, but I don't get afraid. Like I'm never afraid, and I don't mean to say that as like, I'm never afraid, but yeah, I don't let that creep in my head. Because I have, obviously, I've been in situations like that, and you lose sight of your goals and you lose sight of perspective, and you start to kind of just act fearfully, panicky. You never want to panic, you never want to have fear. And so I just try to erase that out of my head entirely. And working with alligators, typically I'm never afraid at any point. It's really if I go to do a novel thing I've never done before, I get that feeling and I'm like, oh man, quell that, okay, and get rid of that crap. Because you can't let fear creep in your mind, because that's what makes you do irrational things. You need to have a clear mind and know exactly what you're doing and have a plan. So freediving definitely helps me out a lot. I do, for those who don't know, I do a lot of work with sharks as well, a lot of freediving. Sharks have the ampullae lorenzini in the face. They can actually pick up the electrical signals emitted by your heart. So if your heart rate is going and you're afraid, they know. And also, if your heart rate is going, you're using a lot more oxygen than you should be, and your breath hold is gonna suck. So you're not gonna be able to make it down there. So you do these kind of mental exercises to calm yourself down and to be calm and lower your heart rate and be relaxed. And that way you can have a better breath hold, and it keeps the animals more calm that you're around as well. So some of the cool things, like when you look at an alligator, like when you look at their back, the osteoderms down the back are free floating bone plates that evolved strictly as a defense mechanism for the alligator. Now, most of your skeletal structure is a support system for your musculature. Now, it protects you, of course, you know, but it has other purposes. The sole purpose of these plates down the back is body armor protection for the alligator. So these bones, these osteoderms, which literally means bone skin, are far more dense than the bones in the rest of the skeletal structure, or your skeletal structure for that matter. So like these ones, the thickest ones at the neck, the nuchal scutes, can actually stop a small caliber bullet. And to give you an idea of just how thick these things are, when an alligator is eaten by a python out here, which happens, the python has no problem digesting the entire skull, the arms, legs, vertebrae. Every bone in the body is digested except for these largest nuchal scutes will actually pass through the system because they're that dense. Yeah, imagine passing that thing, right? But anyways, it is pretty crazy when you think about just how dense those bones are and how strong they are. When you look along the alligator's face, they have these little black dots all along the face. These are integumentary sensory organs. They're very sensitive to touch and movement in the water. So if I'm over here and I just move around a little bit or touch him or anything like that, he's gonna come over and try to eat it. And so that helps him in an environment that's very murky, or at night when they're hunting, they're able to sit perfectly still in the water and wait for a fish or something to come by, and as soon as it brushes by, they know where it is and they can reach out and try to grab it. And so that's a really great hunting strategy that they have for murky, dark water. Now also when you look at the ears, they can actually seal off the ear right here. You can move that little flap, seal off the ear canal. They also have the nictitating membrane that comes up sideways across right there. And then the really interesting stuff are the breath holds. So I like to think I can hold my breath decently. You know, I can do over 3 minutes, which is decent for a human. There's some humans that can do over 5 minutes. This dude right here can do over 6 hours though. I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowing. And so they'll do a lot of the same things that we do. When they go down, they'll slow their heart rate. Now he'll get his beat down to a beat a minute or less than that. Then he'll shunt the blood into the vital organs, and they'll try to stop all other operations in the body that require a lot of oxygen and be able to hold their breath for an extended period of time. Now what is interesting though, is if I were to take him right now and just suddenly push him underwater, he'll drown within minutes because he didn't prepare himself, just like you. If you're a really good breath holder, if I was just suddenly tackled and held underwater, I'm gonna drown within a couple of seconds. But if you give me a moment to breathe up and prepare myself, then I can hold my breath for several minutes. They have to do the same thing too. So as a handler, you need to be aware of that, because a lot of people know, oh, an alligator can hold his breath for over an hour or several hours. And then they think that if he's just forced underwater, he's fine. No, he'll drown within minutes, just like you would, because he didn't prepare himself for it. So these alligators we have in here are the very lucky ones, are the nuisance gators that weren't killed. What typically happens with the nuisance alligators, once a report is made, a trapper comes out, they catch, they kill the alligator, end of the story. 99.9% of all nuisance gators that are caught are killed, because the law is they either have to be killed or kept in captivity. And the trapper will make his living by selling the meat and hide of that nuisance alligator. So that's why I always tell people, never feed an alligator no matter what size it is, because feeding it not only is a danger to you and other people, it is a death sentence for that alligator. Because once they exhibit this feeding response and they exhibit this feeding behavior, they're gonna have to be caught, they're gonna have to be killed, and that's the end of the story for the alligator. So no matter how harmless it may seem, never feed an alligator, because it is a death sentence for him. Typically, the fastest you'll see an alligator move on land is when he's afraid and he runs away from something. And that's the fastest you'll likely see an alligator move on land, which is not a good measurement to give people, because they're like, oh, an alligator can run at such and such miles per hour, and they're like, oh my God, that's how fast they chase. No, that's how fast they run away from something when they're afraid of it. They don't chase things running after it on land. Unless you have a feeding response animal or within 6 feet of the water's edge, you're not gonna see him running across a football field chasing a rabbit. That's not how they hunt. They're not even gonna try to do it. So it's a misrepresentation. So what I try to do here is offer a interaction with alligators in the water. And this applies to everybody from alligator enthusiasts and lovers that I've only worked with them in shallow water or on land. And it also applies to just your general person who's interested in wildlife. I've had people in here that are terrified of alligators, and that's why they're doing it. They want to get over their fear. They don't really like them. But either way, no matter what your motivation is, once I have people come in here and they actually do it, they always walk away completely amazed by the grace that these animals have, because we only really watch them from the surface. And these are aquatic animals, and when you get a chance to watch them move in the water, it gives you a whole newfound respect for their ability and their grace in the water and how they interact with their environment and how skilled they are in their environment. Because when you see him on land, I mean, he looks like a log half the time, doesn't move, doesn't do anything, and then when they do walk, it's just kind of like very, you know, they're kind of goofy looking, they trip over stuff. They're kind of goofy, you know, but then when you see them in the water and you see how skilled they are and how beautifully they move, it really changes your perspective. So that's why I like to offer this opportunity for people to come, swim with an alligator, see how they move in the water, and observe and interact with them. So if you do want to come and join me and swim with Casper and the other alligators, you shoot me an email, chrisgillettewildlife@gmail.com, or you can hit me up on Instagram, gatorboys_Chris.